The evening light streamed through the tall windows of the Crystal Room, one of New York's most expensive restaurants. Robert Chen sat at his usual corner table, fingers tapping impatiently on the crisp white tablecloth. At 53, he had the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing and the stiff posture of a man who rarely relaxed. His phone buzzed again, the fourth time in 20 minutes. But for once he ignored it. Instead, his attention shifted to his daughter, Lily. She sat across from him in her specialized wheelchair, her dark hair falling over one eye as she looked around the restaurant with undisguised wonder. At 16, Lily had a brightness about her that her father both treasured and worried over. The world wasn't always kind to people with cerebral palsy, no matter how much money their fathers had. "The string quartet is good tonight," Robert said, filling the silence between them. These father-daughter dinners had been his late wife's idea. 4 years after her death, he still kept them up, though conversation didn't come easily to him. Lily's fingers moved carefully over her tablet, the device she used to communicate. A moment later, a computerized voice spoke. "I like watching the people dance." Robert followed her gaze to the small dance floor where a few couples swayed to the music. A strange sadness gripped him. His brilliant, beautiful daughter, who loved music more than anything, couldn't experience dancing the way others could. He'd spent millions on treatments and therapies, but some things remained beyond the reach of even his vast fortune. "Mr. Chen, would you like to see our wine list tonight?" Robert looked up to see their waitress standing beside their table. Her name tag read, Tasha. She was probably in her mid-20s, with close-cropped natural hair and a warm smile that seemed genuinely pleased to see them, unlike the forced politeness he usually encountered. "The usual," he said shortly. "Chateau Margaux, 2015. "Of course." Tasha turned to Lily. "And would you like your usual sparkling apple cider? Or would you like to try something different tonight? We just got in some wonderful passion fruit juice that's really something special." Robert felt a flicker of surprise. Most servers directed all their questions to him, treating Lily as if her physical limitations affected her mind as well. But Tasha was looking directly at Lily, patiently waiting for her response. Lily's face lit up as she typed, "Passion fruit, please." "Excellent choice. I'll be right back with your drinks." As Tasha walked away, Robert noticed something different about her movements, a fluid grace that seemed out of place in the restaurant setting. When she returned with their drinks, Lily noticed it too. "Were you a dancer?" The computerized voice couldn't convey curiosity, but Lily's raised eyebrows did. Tasha's smile widened. "Still am, actually. Dance therapy student by day, waitress by night. How did you know?" "The way you move," Lily typed. "Like music follows you." Something passed between the two of them then, a moment of understanding that made Robert feel strangely like an outsider. He cleared his throat. "We should order." Throughout the meal, Robert couldn't help noticing how Lily kept watching the dance floor. Each time a new song started, her eyes would light up, and her fingers would tap lightly against her wheelchair's armrest. It was a small movement, but to Robert, who knew every nuance of his daughter's expressions, it spoke volumes. When Tasha came to clear their plates, Lily's tablet slipped from its mount on her wheelchair tray. With impressive reflexes, Tasha caught it before it hit the ground. As she carefully secured it back in place, Lily typed something that made the waitress laugh. "What did she say?" Robert asked, feeling oddly left out. "She asked if my dance reflexes helped me save expensive equipment," Tasha explained, her eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. "Smart kid you've got here." The band shifted to a slower song, one that Robert recognized as Lily's favorite. "What a Wonderful World." His daughter's face transformed, a look of longing so intense it made his chest ache. "I wish I could dance." Lily's device spoke. Robert opened his mouth to offer the usual comfort, the practiced lines about how they'd find new therapies, how technology was advancing every day. But before he could speak, Tasha knelt beside Lily's wheelchair. "Who says you can't?" she asked softly. Robert stiffened. My daughter's condition makes it impossible for— With respect, sir, Tasha interrupted, her eyes never leaving Lily's. Dance isn't just about moving your legs. It's about feeling the music, expressing yourself. There are no rules that say how that has to happen. The hope that bloomed on Lily's face made Robert fall silent. He watched, stunned as Tasha spoke, quietly to the maitre d', who nodded after a moment's hesitation. What's going on? Robert asked. I've asked for a 5-minute break, Tasha explained, returning to their table. With your permission, I'd like to dance with Lily. Before he could process what was happening, Tasha had moved behind Lily's wheelchair, gently guiding it toward the small dance floor. The other couples parted, some with curious glances, others with warm smiles. Is this okay? Robert heard Tasha ask his daughter, who nodded enthusiastically. What happened next would stay with Robert. Forever. Tasha began to move around the wheelchair, her own dancing fluid and beautiful, but always connected to Lily. She took Lily's hands in hers when the song called for it, helped her raise her arms to the music, and spun her wheelchair in gentle, sweeping turns that made Lily's face light up with pure joy. Some of the other diners stopped to watch. Robert saw a few discreetly wipe away tears. Others smiled. An elderly couple joined them on the dance floor, the woman giving Lily a small bow as if acknowledging another dancer. Robert couldn't take his eyes off his daughter's face. When was the last time he'd seen her look like that? Had he ever? The realization that this simple moment of joy might be a first for her struck him like a physical blow. He was so absorbed in watching Lily that he almost didn't notice when Victor Peterson entered the restaurant. Almost. But Victor's imposing 6'4" frame was hard to miss, especially when accompanied by his usual entourage of assistants and yes men. As the CEO of Peterson Media Group, Victor was Robert's biggest potential investor for his new tech venture, and the whole reason they were at the Crystal Room tonight. Their meeting wasn't supposed to start for another 30 minutes, but Victor was notorious for showing up early to catch people off guard. Robert watched Victor take in the scene on the dance floor, his expression shifting from surprise to something harder to read. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and Robert felt a moment of uncharacteristic uncertainty. Should he call Lily back to the table? Pretend this unusual display wasn't happening? His entire business future might depend on Victor's investment. But then he looked back at his daughter, at the pure happiness radiating from her face as Tasha helped her twirl in her wheelchair. And something shifted inside him. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Robert Chen decided business could wait. The song was ending. Tasha guided Lily's wheelchair back toward their table, both of them slightly breathless and smiling. Around them, several diners broke into spontaneous applause. That was wonderful, Lily typed, her fingers moving faster than Robert had ever seen them move before. You're a natural, Tasha replied. Music lives in you. As they approached the table, Robert stood up. He opened his mouth, not sure what would come out. A thank you, a reprimand for the waitress taking such liberties. When Victor Peterson stepped into their path, Robert, Victor said, his voice carrying in that way that powerful men's voices often did. I didn't expect dinner and a show. Robert felt himself tense, preparing for the worst. Victor was old school, traditional in his views. What would he think of this unconventional scene? Of Robert allowing his disabled daughter to become the center of attention? Of a black waitress stepping so far outside her professional role? The future of his company hung in the balance as Victor's gaze moved from Robert to Lily, still glowing from her dance, to Tasha, who had straightened her posture but showed no sign of embarrassment. Sir, Tasha said politely, I should get back. To work? Wait, Victor said, raising a hand. His expression was unreadable as he looked at Lily. Young lady, that was quite a performance. Robert held his breath. Everything, his business, his reputation, his relationship with his daughter, seemed suspended in this moment. What happened next would change everything, though he didn't know yet exactly how. Victor's eyes lingered on Lily for a moment longer, his expression still unreadable. Then he did something Robert hadn't seen in the 15 years he'd known the man. He smiled. Not his business smile, tight and calculated, but something genuine that reached his eyes. My late sister had cerebral palsy, Victor said quietly. She loved music too. Never got to dance like that, though. The tension in Robert's shoulders eased slightly, but before he could respond, Victor turned to Tasha with a curious look. That wasn't just kindness, he observed. Those were real techniques. You know what you're doing. Tasha nodded. I'm studying dance therapy at Willard College. We work with all kinds of people, those with physical disabilities, autism, trauma, survivors. Movement helps everyone, just in different ways. Fascinating, Victor said, and to Robert's surprise, he actually seemed to mean it. Robert, mind if I join you two? I think our meeting can wait a bit. The next 30 minutes were unlike any Robert had experienced. Victor pulled up a chair, ordered drinks for everyone including Tasha, who politely declined but was encouraged by Victor to sit with them during her break, and proceeded to ask Lily questions about her experience dancing. He spoke directly to her, waiting patiently as she typed her responses. The spinning was the best part, Lily's device voiced. I felt free. Freedom? Victor nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what my sister used to say about music, that it freed her from her body's limitations. Robert watched in amazement. In all their previous interactions, Victor had been ruthlessly focused on business, showing little interest in personal matters. Yet here he was, connecting with Lily in a way Robert himself sometimes struggled to do. Miss Victor looked at Tasha's name tag. Tasha, this dance therapy program you're in. Tell me more. It's a small department, Tasha explained. Only 12 students this year. We work in community centers, hospitals, schools for kids with special needs. The research shows amazing benefits: improved motor function, emotional regulation, social connection. But funding is always tight. Always is for the things that matter most, Victor murmured. The restaurant manager approached their table, clearly nervous about Tasha spending so much time with customers. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Chen, I apologize if your staff has been excellent, Victor cut him off. In fact, I'd like to speak with you about something. He stood up and walked a few steps away with the manager, talking in low tones. Robert turned to Tasha. I should thank you for what you did for Lily. No thanks needed, she said simply. Everyone deserves to dance. Can we do it again sometime? Lily typed, her eyes hopeful. Before Robert could form a response, Victor returned to the table. Well, that's settled. Miss Tasha has the rest of the evening off with pay. He smiled at their surprised faces. I've owned this restaurant for 12 years. Never come in much myself, but the chef makes an excellent steak. You own this place? Robert asked, stunned. In all their business discussions, Victor had never mentioned it. Among others, small investments. Victor waved his hand dismissively, though everyone knew there was nothing small about Victor's investments. Now I've made a proposition to the manager. With your permission, Robert, I'd like to invite Tasha to join you and Lily for dinner. As a guest, not staff. Then perhaps afterward she might be willing to show Lily a few more dance moves. But the band has agreed to stay an extra hour. Robert looked at his daughter's face, alight with excitement, then at Tasha, who seemed both surprised and touched by the offer. That would be wonderful, Robert said, finding he truly meant it. What followed was the most enjoyable evening Robert had experienced in years. Tasha, once settled into her role as guest rather than server, was intelligent and engaging. She spoke passionately about dance therapy, explaining how movement could help people process emotions they couldn't put into words. That's why Lily responded so well, she explained. She has all these thoughts and feelings, and dancing gives them somewhere to go. Is that why you dance? Robert asked. Tasha's smile dimmed slightly. Partly. My mom got sick when I was 8. Cancer. Dancing helped me through it. Later, when money got tight for college, it helped me get scholarships. Your mother recovered? Victor asked gently. No, Tasha said simply. But she made me promise to keep dancing. Said every time I danced, she'd be watching. Robert felt a pang of recognition. Hadn't his wife said something similar about Lily's music? That whenever their daughter played piano, despite the difficulty her hands gave her, it was a moment of connection to something larger than themselves? After dinner, true to his word, Victor had the dance floor cleared. The band began, playing a selection of songs that had Lily bouncing slightly in her wheelchair with excitement. For the next hour, Tasha showed both Lily and Robert simple movements they could do together, hand dances, upper body movements, ways to feel and express the rhythm that didn't require standing. Try this. Tasha guided Robert's hands to Lily's, showing him how to support her movements without taking over. Let her lead. It was awkward at first. Robert had never been much of a dancer, and years of business dealings had made physical expression feel foreign to him. But Lily's delight was infectious, and soon he found himself moving with less self-consciousness. Other diners watched with smiles. One elderly couple even joined them briefly, the woman showing Lily a seated dance move from her own culture. Victor sat at their table, occasionally taking business calls but always returning his attention to the dance floor with what looked like genuine interest. When the evening finally wound down, Lily was tired but happier than Robert had seen her in years. As they prepared to leave, Victor pulled Robert aside. "I've been thinking," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. "This dance therapy program Tasha mentioned, there might be something there." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Business-wise?" "No," Victor shook his head. "I mean for my foundation, the one I started after my sister passed. We fund medical research, but maybe we've been too narrow in our focus." The two men looked over at Tasha, who was showing Lily one last movement sequence, both of them laughing at something. "She's gifted," Robert acknowledged, "and not just at dancing." "People like that," Victor said quietly. "They see past the surface, past the wheelchairs and the balance sheets and the business reputations. They see people." He clapped Robert on the shoulder. "About our meeting. Let's reschedule for tomorrow. I have some new ideas I'd like to discuss, bigger picture stuff." After Victor left, Robert approached Tasha. "How can we thank you?" "No need." She smiled. "This was one of the best nights I've had in a long time. Would you—" Robert hesitated, then pushed forward. "Would you consider working with Lily? Private sessions?" "I'd pay whatever—" "I'd be happy to," Tasha interrupted gently. "But not as a job, as a friend. Friends dance together. That's all this needs to be." Robert blinked, taken aback. In his world, everything had a price tag. The idea that someone would refuse payment, would choose friendship over financial gain, was almost foreign to him. Lily's tablet spoke. "Friends. I'd like that." As they left the restaurant, the night air cool against their faces, Robert felt something shift inside. Him. All his life he'd measured success in dollars, in deals closed, in companies acquired. Yet tonight, watching his daughter dance for the first time, he'd glimpsed a different kind of wealth. His phone buzzed again, another business emergency requiring his attention. For once he didn't feel the usual surge of importance. Instead, he felt a strange emptiness, as if seeing for the first time how little his empire mattered compared to the joy on his daughter's face tonight. "Everything okay, Dad?" Lily typed, noticing his expression. "Yes," he said, tucking the phone away without checking it. "Just thinking about dancing." The car ride home was quiet but comfortably so. Lily fell asleep, a small smile still on her face. Robert watched the city lights blur past the window, his mind racing with thoughts he'd never entertained before. What if he'd been defining success all wrong? What if all his efforts to give Lily the best life, the top doctors, the most expensive treatments, the elite private tutors, had actually been missing what she needed most? Not to be fixed or improved, but to be seen, to connect, to express herself. And what about himself? When was the last time he'd felt as alive as Lily had looked on that dance floor? When was the last time he'd done anything that wasn't in service to increasing his wealth or status? His late wife had tried to tell him, he realized, in the gentle ways she'd pushed back against his driven nature, in how she'd insisted on those weekly father-daughter dinners, in her own dedication to community work he'd never fully understood. "You're missing it, Robert," she'd said once during one of their rare arguments. The whole point of all this, he hadn't understood then. Tonight, watching Lily dance with Tasha, he'd caught a glimpse of what she might have meant. The next morning, Robert made a decision. He canceled his first 3 meetings, something he hadn't done in years unless physically ill. Instead, he sat with Lily at breakfast, asking her questions about dance, about music, about what she wanted. More dancing, her device spoke. With Tasha, and maybe other kids like me? The seed of an idea began to form in Robert's mind. It was small at first, just a question. What if there was a place where children like Lily could experience the joy of movement, of expression, regardless of their physical limitations? He made a call to Victor, expecting to leave a message with an assistant. To his surprise, Victor picked up personally. "I've been thinking about last night too," Victor said before Robert could even explain why he was calling. "My assistant is already researching dance therapy programs nationally. Not many of them, it turns out. Opportunity there, wouldn't you say?" "I was thinking the same thing," Robert admitted. "But not as a business venture." "Of course not," Victor agreed. "As something better. Something that matters." Later that day, Robert reached out to Tasha, inviting her to meet with him and Victor to discuss a potential project, a center for adaptive dance and movement therapy, with her expertise helping to shape it from the ground up. "I can't pay for something like that," she said, clearly overwhelmed by the idea. "You don't need to," Robert assured her. "Victor and I can handle the financial side. What we need is your vision, your knowledge, and your friendship." Lily typed from beside her father. "For me and other kids." Tasha was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When's the meeting?" As Robert hung up the phone, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The thrill of building something not for profit, but for purpose. It reminded him of his earliest days as an entrepreneur, before money became the only measure of success. His assistant appeared at his office door looking concerned. "Sir, you've missed the call with Tokyo, and the board is asking about the quarterly projections." Robert nodded. "Schedule a full board meeting for tomorrow. There are going to be some changes around here." "Changes, sir?" Robert looked at the photo of Lily on his desk, taken years ago when she was small. Beside it sat a new one, a snapshot from last night that the restaurant manager had emailed him this morning, showing Lily in her wheelchair, face alight with joy as Tasha guided her through a dance. "Yes?" he said firmly. "I think it's time I remembered what really matters." The conference room fell silent as Robert finished speaking. Around the long mahogany table, board members exchanged glances ranging from confusion to outright alarm. He had just announced his intention to create a new foundation dedicated to adaptive dance and movement therapy, funded initially with $50 million from his personal fortune. "Let me get this straight," said Howard Barnes, the longest-serving board member. "You want to take time away from running this company to start a dance charity because your daughter danced with a waitress?" His tone made clear how ridiculous he found the whole idea. Robert met his gaze steadily. "My daughter danced for the first time in her life, Howard. And yes, that changed my perspective." "We all sympathize with Lily's condition," said Diana Wells, the chief financial officer. "But this seems like an emotional reaction that could impact shareholder value, perhaps a more modest donation." "This isn't up for debate," Robert interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not asking for company funds. I'm informing you that I'll be adjusting my schedule to accommodate this new project." Another uncomfortable silence filled the room. Robert could read the thoughts behind their carefully neutral expressions. Some were calculating how this might affect their stock options. Others were questioning his stability, his judgment. "May I speak?" The voice came from Philip Norris, the newest and youngest board member. Robert had appointed him 6 months ago against considerable opposition from the old guard. "Go ahead, Philip." I think this could actually benefit the company, Philip said, tapping his tablet. Studies show that companies whose leadership demonstrates genuine social responsibility outperform their peers by an average of 12% over 5 years, not to mention the potential PR value. Robert nodded appreciatively, though PR was the furthest thing from his mind. Thank you, Philip. But to be clear, I'm not doing this for company benefit. I'm doing it because it's right. The meeting ended shortly after, with Robert aware of the whispers that would follow. In the cutthroat world of tech billionaires, any action not directly tied to profit was viewed with suspicion. As predicted, by afternoon, his phone was buzzing with calls from concerned investors and partners. His assistant looked increasingly worried as she relayed messages. Mr. Steinman from Venture Capital Partners is particularly insistent, she said. He's mentioned something about reconsidering their position in next month's funding round. Tell him I'll call back tomorrow, Robert replied, checking his watch. I have another meeting now. That meeting was taking place not in a sleek boardroom, but in a small, sunlit coffee shop downtown. Tasha was already there when he arrived, dressed in casual clothes rather than her waitress uniform. Seated beside her was a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and an air of quiet authority. Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Rivera, Tasha said as Robert sat down. She runs the dance therapy program at Willard College where I study. Please call me Robert, he said, shaking the woman's hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Dr. Rivera nodded, her expression careful. Tasha has explained your interest in adaptive dance therapy. I admit I'm curious about what a tech CEO wants with our little program. Her directness was refreshing after a morning of corporate doublespeak. I want to learn, Robert said simply. And eventually to help expand access to programs like yours. With money, Dr. Rivera stated, not asked. Initially, yes, but I'm hoping for more than that. A true partnership. Dr. Rivera studied him for a long moment. Mr. Chen, Robert, I've been working in this field for 25 years. I've seen well-meaning wealthy people get excited about our work before. They write checks, take photos for their foundation's websites, and move on to the next cause. Our students need sustainability, not charity. Robert felt a flash of defensive anger, but forced himself to consider her words. Wasn't that exactly how he'd approached philanthropy in the past? Writing checks that assuaged his conscience without requiring genuine involvement? You're right to be skeptical, he acknowledged. But this is different. This is about my daughter. Dr. Rivera's expression softened slightly. Tasha told me about Lily. I'm glad she had that experience, but creating lasting change requires more than one inspiring moment. I know, Robert said. That's why I'm here. To listen and learn before taking action. Something in his sincerity must have reached her, because Dr. Rivera nodded slowly. All right. Let's talk about what real support for adaptive dance would look like. For the next 2 hours, Robert mostly listened as Dr. Rivera and Tasha painted a picture of the field, its challenges, its potential, its needs. They talked about limited funding, lack of accessible spaces, the need for specialized training, and the struggle for legitimacy in both medical and artistic communities. Most people think what we do is just for fun, Dr. Rivera explained. They don't understand the therapeutic benefits. Improved motor function, emotional regulation, social connection, pain management. The research backs it up, Tasha added, sliding over several academic papers she'd printed. But insurance rarely covers it, and most programs depend on grants that barely keep the lights on. By the time they finished their second round of coffee, Robert's mind was racing with possibilities. This wasn't just about creating a nice experience for Lily and children like her. This was about recognizing a vital but overlooked approach to healing and connection. I want to see it, he said suddenly. Your program, the actual work. Dr. Rivera and Tasha exchanged glances. We have a session this afternoon at Westside Community Center, Tasha said. Children with various physical disabilities. You could observe if you like. I would, Robert nodded. Very much. The community center was in a part of town Robert rarely visited, a working-class neighborhood with well-maintained but aging buildings. Inside, the dance studio was simple: wooden floors, wall-length mirrors, and bars. Nothing like the state-of-the-art facilities he was used to. As children began arriving with parents or caregivers, Robert sat quietly in a corner, trying to be unobtrusive. There were 8 children in total, ranging in age from about 6 to 15, with various physical challenges, some in wheelchairs like Lily, others with walkers or braces. What happened next moved Robert in ways he hadn't expected. Dr. Rivera and Tasha, along with 2 other students from their program, began a series of exercises that engaged each child at their own level. There was no sense of limitation, only possibility. A boy with leg braces created rhythms by tapping his metal supports. A girl in a wheelchair similar to Lily's used fabric streamers to extend her movements through space. Most striking was the joy on their faces. These weren't children being treated. They were children expressing themselves, connecting, creating. Halfway through, Tasha approached Robert. "Would you like to join us?" His immediate instinct was to refuse. He wasn't a dancer. He didn't belong in this circle. But the open, expectant faces of the children made refusal impossible. For the next 20 minutes, Robert Chen, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country, found himself following the lead of children as they taught him their movements. He felt awkward, out of place, and strangely free. "You're a natural," said a small voice beside him. A girl of about 8 with arm braces was watching him with solemn eyes. "I don't think so." Robert laughed. "But thank you." "My dad says he can't dance either," she continued. "He says he's too busy making money." The simple statement hit Robert like a physical blow. How many times had he said similar things to Lily? Too busy for games, for stories, for simply being present with her? After the session ended, the children's parents began arriving to pick them up. Robert watched their interactions, tired but loving, doing their best with limited resources. One mother was trying to maneuver her son's wheelchair down a step that lacked a proper ramp. Another was explaining to Dr. Rivera that they might have to miss next week's session because their car was in the shop. These were challenges he never faced. If Lily needed something, he bought it. If a building wasn't accessible, he made a call and it was fixed, or they went somewhere else. Money solved most problems in his world. But money alone couldn't solve everything. It couldn't create the kind of community he'd witnessed today, where differences were celebrated rather than accommodated. It couldn't replace the human connection that happened when people moved together in shared joy. As the last family left, Dr. Rivera approached him. "Thoughts?" "I've been thinking too small," Robert admitted. "I was picturing a nice facility, well-funded programs, but this is about more than that. It's about changing how we see ability, expression, connection." Dr. Rivera smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Now you're getting it." That evening, Robert canceled his usual driver and took the subway home, something he hadn't done in years. He wanted time to think, to process what he'd seen. The train car was crowded with commuters, office workers, students, service workers heading to night shifts, people whose lives rarely intersected with his. He thought about how isolated he'd become in his wealth, how isolated he'd allowed Lily to become in her disability. They lived in a bubble of privilege that protected them from hardship, but also cut them off from the messy, beautiful reality of human connection. When he arrived home, he found Lily in the living room with her night nurse, Beth. They were watching videos of dance performances on Lily's tablet. "We've been researching adaptive dance," Beth explained. "Lily's idea." "Show Dad the wheelchair ballet," Lily typed, her eyes bright with excitement. Robert watched in amazement as dancers in wheelchairs performed complex, beautiful movements he would never have imagined possible. "This is incredible. I want to do that," Lily's device spoke. In the past, Robert might have tempered her expectations, gently steered her toward more realistic goals. Tonight, he simply sat beside her. "Then that's what we'll work toward." Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Robert made 3 calls. The first was to Victor Peterson, updating him on what he'd learned and seen. The second was to his lawyer, beginning the process of establishing the foundation. The third was to Tasha. "I want Lily to join the community center class," he said, without preamble. "Not a private session, the regular group." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure? It's not exactly what you're used to." "That's precisely why I want it," Robert replied. "For both of us." The next morning, Robert called an emergency meeting with his executive team. They arrived looking concerned, no doubt expecting more unsettling announcements about his new passion project. "I need to restructure my schedule," he told them. "I'll be taking Wednesday afternoons off for the foreseeable future, and I want to establish more flexible work options for employees who are caregivers." His chief operating officer frowned. "Robert, while we all support work-life balance in theory, as CEO, your availability is no more important than any parent's time with their child," Robert finished firmly. "I've missed too much of Lily's life being available for everything else. That changes now." To his surprise, it was Diana Wells, usually his most bottom-line focused executive, who spoke up in support. "My sister has a child with Down syndrome," she said quietly. "She had to leave her career because her company wouldn't accommodate her needs. I've always admired our company's benefits, but we could do more." One by one, others joined in. Philip suggested a task force to examine their policies for employees with caregiving responsibilities. The head of HR mentioned specialized recruiting to increase hiring of people with disabilities. Ideas began flowing, perspectives shifting. Robert sat back, watching his team with new eyes. They weren't just employees, they were people with lives, families, struggles, and hopes he knew almost nothing about, just as they likely knew little about his struggles with Lily. For years he had compartmentalized his life, keeping Lily's challenges separate from his business world, believing that was the professional thing to do. Now he wondered if that separation had cost everyone something valuable. "Thank you all," he said when the discussion wound down. "This is exactly the kind of thinking we need, not just for our new foundation, but for our company culture. We've been innovative in technology. Now let's be innovative in humanity." As the meeting ended, Robert felt lighter than he had in years. The path ahead wasn't clear yet. There would be challenges, resistance, moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, he was building something that measured success not in dollars but in lives changed. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from Tasha. "Lily's spot in Wednesday's class is confirmed. She's going to love it." Robert smiled, imagining his daughter's face when he told her. Sometimes the smallest moments, a dance with a kind waitress, a child's laughter, a community of people helping each other move through the world, contained the greatest possibilities for change. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The small seed that had been planted that night at the Crystal Room had grown into something far bigger than Robert could have imagined. Wednesday afternoons had become sacred time for him and Lily. They never missed the community center dance class where Lily had blossomed in ways that astonished everyone who knew her. Her confidence had grown, her communication had become more fluid, and most importantly, she smiled more. Today, however, was special for a different reason. Robert adjusted his tie nervously as he and Lily waited in the lobby of Chen Tower, his company headquarters. "Excited?" he asked her. "Nervous," Lily typed on her tablet. "What if they don't like it?" "They will," Robert assured her, though he felt the same flutter of anxiety. "You and Tasha have created something amazing." The elevator doors opened, revealing Tasha dressed in a professional outfit rather than her usual dance clothes. She had quit her waitressing job 3 months ago to work full-time on developing the Foundation's programs. "Ready for this?" she asked, her own nervousness showing through her usual confident demeanor. Before either could answer, Victor Peterson strode through the lobby doors, bringing with him the commanding presence that had made him a media mogul. "The gang's all here," he boomed, clapping Robert on the shoulder. "Let's go change some minds." The 4 of them rode the elevator to the top floor, where the Foundation's board members were gathering. Robert had carefully selected this group, not just wealthy donors, but experts in therapeutic movement, disability advocates, education specialists, and parents of children with disabilities. People who understood both the vision and the practical challenges of making it reality. As they entered the boardroom, conversations hushed. All eyes turned to Lily in her wheelchair, positioned at the head of the table beside her father. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began. "As you know, we've spent the last 6 months developing our mission and approach. Today, Lily and Tasha will present the program model they've been creating." He stepped back, letting Lily take center stage. Using her tablet and a series of slides they'd prepared together, she began to share their vision for what they now called movement without limits. "Dance changed my life," her device voiced as she tapped the keys. "Not because it fixed my body, but because it freed my spirit. Every person deserves that freedom." Tasha stepped forward, elaborating on the practical aspects, how they would train instructors, design accessible spaces, create adaptive techniques for various disabilities, and build community through shared movement experiences. "This isn't about performance," Tasha explained. "Though performances will happen, it's about connection between mind and body, between people, between communities that rarely interact." The presentation continued for 30 minutes with Lily and Tasha seamlessly alternating. Robert watched the board members' reactions shift from polite interest to genuine engagement. Even Dr. Rivera, who had initially been skeptical of Robert's involvement, was nodding appreciatively. When they finished, the room burst into applause. Questions followed, thoughtful, challenging ones about sustainability, about measurement of outcomes, about accessibility across socioeconomic divides. "We don't want this to be only for families who can afford it," Lily typed firmly. "Dance is for everyone." "Which brings us to the funding model," Victor interjected, taking the floor. "Robert and I have each committed $50 million as seed funding. But this isn't just about our money. We're creating a model where corporations can sponsor programs in underserved communities as part of their social responsibility initiatives." More discussion followed, with board members contributing insights from their various areas of expertise. Robert sat back, letting the conversation flow without trying to control it. This was so different from his usual board meetings, where he typically drove the agenda and made most decisions. Here, he was learning as much as leading. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Rivera approached Robert. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I misjudged your commitment. This is far more substantial than I expected." "No apology needed," Robert replied. "Your skepticism pushed us to be better, more thorough." Outside the boardroom, as people gathered in small groups to continue discussions, a familiar face caught Robert's attention. Howard Barnes, his company's longest-serving board member, was standing awkwardly near the elevator. "Howard," Robert greeted him, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." Howard shifted uncomfortably. "I was curious. After our disagreement at the company board meeting, I wanted to see what was so important it could distract Robert Chen from business." Before Robert could respond, Lily wheeled herself over. "Did you see our presentation?" her device asked. Howard nodded, his usual brusque manner softening slightly. "I did. It was impressive." "Come meet Tasha," Lily typed, not waiting for a response before turning her wheelchair and clearly expecting him to follow. To Robert's surprise, Howard did. He watched as his daughter introduced the conservative business executive to the young Black dance therapist who had changed their lives. The unlikely pair were soon deep in conversation, with Howard asking questions and actually listening to the answers. "Quite a change from 6 months ago," Victor commented, appearing at Robert's side, "for all of us." Robert nodded. The change in himself was perhaps the most profound. He still ran his company, still made deals and developed technology. But the relentless drive that had defined him for decades had been tempered by new priorities, new perspectives. "Did you ever think," he asked Victor, "that we had it all wrong? That all those years chasing bigger deals, bigger profits, We're missing the point. Victor finished for him. Every day since my sister died, I just didn't know how to change course. The foundation headquarters officially opened 2 months later. They had purchased an old community center that had been slated for demolition and transformed it into a state-of-the-art facility for adaptive movement. But unlike most places that catered to people with disabilities, it wasn't clinical or utilitarian. It was beautiful, filled with natural light, vibrant colors, and spaces designed for both function and joy. On opening day, Robert stood back as Lily cut the ribbon with Tasha's help. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for local news. They had deliberately kept the event low-key, focused on the community rather than celebrities or wealthy donors. Children and adults with various disabilities were the first through the doors, welcomed by a team of instructors trained in adaptive movement techniques. Among them was Beth, Lily's former night nurse, who had quit her nursing job to join their instructor training program. "This is really happening," Tasha said, standing beside Robert as they watched the space fill with visitors. "I still can't quite believe it." "Believe it," Robert said, "and this is just the beginning." The foundation's plan was ambitious: to open 5 more centers across the country within 2 years, and to develop training programs that could be implemented in existing dance studios, schools, and community centers. They had already received inquiries from organizations in 12 states and 3 countries. As the day progressed, Robert found himself in conversation with parents, educators, therapists, and people with disabilities themselves. He listened more than he spoke, still learning, still understanding the depth of need their foundation was addressing. One mother, tears in her eyes, gripped his hand tightly. "My son has never been invited to a birthday party," she told him. "Other parents see his wheelchair and assume he can't participate, but here he belongs." Later, as the crowd thinned, Robert noticed Lily deep in conversation with a teenage boy who used a communication device similar to hers. They were typing rapidly, occasionally laughing at something on each other's screens. "She's made a friend," Tasha observed, following his gaze. "His name is Danny. He's a poet, actually. Writes amazing stuff." The simple normality of it, a teenage girl chatting with a boy her age, struck Robert powerfully. How many of these ordinary moments of connection had Lily missed because the world wasn't built for her? How many had he missed by keeping their lives so insulated, so protected? That evening, the foundation hosted a small dinner for staff and key supporters. Lily insisted on sitting with her new friend Danny and his parents, rather than at the head table with Robert and Victor. Robert watched from across the room as she engaged animatedly with her peers, occasionally glancing his way with a smile. "She's growing up," Dr. Rivera commented, taking the seat beside him, finding her independence. "I know," Robert nodded. "It's wonderful and terrifying, like any parent feels, I suppose. But more complicated when your child has disabilities," she acknowledged. "The balance between protection and freedom is harder to find." They were interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest, Congressman James Wilson, who represented their district. "Mr. Chen," the congressman greeted him, hand extended. "I hope you don't mind my dropping in. What you're doing here caught my attention." Robert shook his hand, instantly wary. Politicians rarely appeared without an agenda. "How can I help you, Congressman?" "Actually, I'm hoping to help you," Wilson replied. "I sit on the Health and Education Committee. We're reviewing policies on adaptive education and therapeutic services. Your foundation's approach is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need to inform policy." Before Robert could respond, Tasha joined them, having overheard the conversation. "Congressman Wilson," she said, "are you familiar with the insurance coverage gaps for adaptive therapies? Because that's where policy could make an immediate difference." To Robert's surprise, the congressman nodded seriously. "I am, and I agree. Would you be willing to come speak to our committee about this? Bring some of your data?" "Absolutely," Tasha said without hesitation. "We've been documenting outcomes from our pilot programs. The results are compelling." As Tasha and the congressman delved into policy details, Robert felt a surge of pride. 6 months ago, she had been a waitress and dance therapy student with big dreams but limited opportunities to realize them. Now she was discussing national policy with the confidence of someone who knew her expertise was valuable. The evening wound down, with guests gradually departing. Robert found himself sitting alone for a moment, taking in the space they had created. From the lobby he could hear laughter, Lily and her new friends, reluctant to end the night. Victor dropped into the chair beside him, loosening his tie. "Quite a day. Quite a 6 months," Robert corrected. "True," Victor agreed. "You know, I've been thinking about something. All those years we spent competing, for deals, for market share, for spots on those ridiculous most powerful lists. What about them? Did you ever feel satisfied? Truly?" Robert considered the question honestly. "Momentarily, when a big deal closed or the stock hit a new high, but it never lasted." "Exactly," Victor nodded. "This feels different." They sat in companionable silence. Two men who had spent decades driven by ambition now finding purpose in something neither had anticipated. The quiet was broken by Lily's return. Her face was flushed with excitement as she wheeled over to them. "Dad, Danny invited me to see his poetry slam next weekend. Can I go?" Robert felt the familiar protective instinct rise, the urge to ask a dozen questions about supervision, accessibility, timing. But he looked at his daughter's face, alight with the simple joy of new friendship, and simply said, "Of course you can." As they prepared to leave, Robert noticed Tasha still deep in conversation with Congressman Wilson and several other guests. She caught his eye and gave him a quick thumbs up before returning to what appeared to be an intense discussion about policy reform. "She doesn't need us anymore," Victor observed, following his gaze. "She never did," Robert replied. "We needed her, to show us what we were missing." That night, as Robert tucked Lily into bed, something he'd started doing again recently, though she was technically too old for it, she held his hand longer than usual. "Thank you," her device spoke. "For what, sweetheart?" "For letting me dance that night, for changing." Robert felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I should be thanking you. You and Tasha showed me what really matters." "We're helping people," Lily typed, her eyes serious. "More than money ever could." "Yes," Robert agreed. "We are." After Lily fell asleep, Robert stood at the window of their penthouse apartment, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, families were going to bed with new hope because of what they'd started. Children like Lily were dreaming of possibilities they hadn't known existed. His phone buzzed with an email, another acquisition offer for one of his companies, the kind of deal that would have consumed him 6 months ago. Now he set the phone aside without replying. It could wait. Some things he had learned were far more valuable than money. Connection, purpose, the joy on his daughter's face when she danced. In letting Lily dance with a waitress that night, Robert had found something he hadn't known he was missing. Not just a new direction for his philanthropy, but a new way of seeing the world and his place in it. His life had indeed changed in ways no balance sheet could measure. 3 years later, Robert stood at the back of a crowded auditorium, watching with barely contained emotion as Lily guided her wheelchair onto the stage. At 19, she had grown from a shy girl into a poised young woman, her confidence evident in every movement. The audience fell silent as she positioned herself center stage. Behind her, a screen displayed the title of her TED Talk, Moving Beyond Limits, Redefining Ability Through Dance. 3 years ago, her voice synthesizer began, the words carefully programmed to match the rhythm of her presentation. "I was a girl who had never danced. Today, I am a dancer who happens to use a wheelchair." Robert felt a lump form in his throat. They had come so far from that evening at the Crystal Room. What had begun as a single moment of connection between his daughter and a kind waitress had grown into a movement that had touched thousands of lives. The Movement Without Limits Foundation now operated in 12 cities across the country. Their instructor certification program had trained over 500 dance and movement therapists. Their advocacy work had helped change insurance policies in 8 states to cover adaptive movement therapy. And Lily, his quiet, reserved daughter, had become the foundation's most powerful voice. People often ask what dance means to me, Lily continued, her fingers moving deftly over her specialized keyboard as images of dancers with various disabilities appeared on the screen behind her. They expect me to talk about freedom from my wheelchair, about pretending my disability doesn't exist. But that misses the point entirely. The audience leaned forward, captivated by her words. Dance isn't about escaping our bodies. It's about fully inhabiting them, whatever form they take. It's about expressing what words cannot, connecting with others through shared movement, finding joy in what is, not what might have been. From his position at the back, Robert could see heads nodding, some people wiping away tears. Lily had that effect on people. Her authenticity cut through defenses, opened hearts. Before I continue, Lily typed, I'd like to introduce the person who first showed me that dance belongs to everyone. My friend and our foundation's program director, Tasha Williams. The audience applauded as Tasha joined Lily on stage. No longer a waitress working double shifts to pay for school, she now held a master's degree in dance therapy and oversaw all the foundation's educational initiatives. Together they demonstrated a dance they had choreographed. Tasha moving around and with Lily's wheelchair, the two of them creating a beautiful harmony of movement that highlighted rather than hid Lily's disability. There was no pretense that Lily could move like Tasha. Instead, they each moved in their own way, creating something together that neither could create alone. When they finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Robert clapped until his hands hurt, pride swelling in his chest. After the talk, a reception was held in a nearby hotel ballroom. Robert watched from across the room as Lily was surrounded by admirers, fellow disability advocates, dance professionals, parents seeking advice for their children. She handled the attention with grace, making sure to give each person her full focus. She's a natural leader, came a voice beside him. Robert turned to find Victor Peterson, now his closest friend, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Robert. She is, Robert agreed, accepting the glass. Better than I ever was. Different, Victor corrected. You built companies. She's building community. Both valuable. They clinked glasses, these 2 former rivals who had found purpose in a shared mission. Victor's foundation had merged with Robert's 2 years ago, creating a more powerful force for change than either could have accomplished alone. Have you seen the latest impact report? Victor asked. The data on educational outcomes for the kids in our programs is remarkable. Test scores up, school attendance improved, social integration metrics off the charts. Robert nodded. Tasha showed me. She's already planning to expand the school partnership program. Always 3 steps ahead, that one, Victor chuckled. Hard to believe she was serving us dinner just 3 years ago. Actually, came Tasha's voice as she joined them. I was serving Mr. Chen dinner. You just showed up and took over, as I recall. The 3 laughed together, comfortable in the easy friendship that had developed between them despite their different backgrounds and paths to this moment. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Congressman Wilson, now a key ally in their policy work. The talk was extraordinary, he told them. Lily is quite the spokesperson. She believes in what she's doing, Robert said simply. As do I, the congressman replied. Which is why I wanted to let you know before the public announcement next week. The Adaptive Therapy Coverage Bill passed committee. It's headed for a floor vote, with bipartisan support. The news was momentous. They had been working toward this for over 2 years. If passed, the bill would require insurance companies to cover adaptive movement therapy, the same way they covered physical therapy, making it accessible to millions more families. That's incredible news, Tasha said, her eyes shining. Do you think it will pass? I do, the congressman nodded. Your testimony made the difference. When you brought those families to speak, showed the videos of before and after, there wasn't a dry eye in the chamber. It's hard to vote against something when you've seen the human impact so clearly. As the congressman moved on to greet other guests, Robert found himself reflecting on the chain of events that had led to this moment. If he hadn't taken Lily to that restaurant that night, if Tasha hadn't been their waitress, if he hadn't allowed that first dance, where would they all be now? Across the room he spotted Danny, the young poet Lily had befriended at the Foundation's opening. Now a published author whose work focused on disability rights, he was deep in conversation with Lily. Their friendship had deepened over the years, evolving recently into something that looked very much like romance. Robert was still adjusting to that idea, his protective instincts warring with his desire for Lily to experience all aspects of life. "Your face gives you away," Tasha teased, following his gaze. "You're doing that overprotective dad thing again. Can you blame me?" Robert sighed. "Dating is complicated enough without what? Disabilities? Different backgrounds?" Tasha raised an eyebrow. "They're good for each other. Danny sees Lily, not her wheelchair, and she pushes him to share his voice with the world." Robert knew she was right. The same fears and prejudices he had once confronted in himself, before that night at the Crystal Room, still surfaced occasionally. The work of changing was ongoing, never complete. "You're right," he acknowledged. "Old habits." "Speaking of seeing people for who they are," Victor interjected, nodding toward the entrance. "Isn't that Howard Barnes?" Robert turned in surprise. Howard, his former board member who had been so dismissive of the foundation in its early days, was indeed entering the reception. More surprisingly, he was accompanied by a young woman in a wheelchair. His granddaughter, Tasha explained, noting their confusion. "Rachel. She started in our teen program last year. Howard never mentioned her to you?" "Never," Robert said, stunned. In 15 years of working together, he never once mentioned having a granddaughter with a disability. "People keep these things hidden sometimes," Tasha said gently, "out of shame or privacy or just not knowing how to talk about it, until they find a community where it's okay." Robert watched as Howard spotted him and made his way over, guiding his granddaughter's wheelchair with the practiced ease of someone who had done it many times. "Chen," Howard nodded in greeting, then smiled at Tasha. "Ms. Williams, that was quite a performance. Rachel hasn't stopped talking about it." The young woman, perhaps 16, looked up shyly. "It was amazing. I've been practicing the arm movements you showed in the workshop last month." "She's getting quite good," Howard added, with undisguised pride. "Her mother says she talks about nothing but dance these days." The Howard Barnes that Robert had known for years, ruthlessly focused on profit, dismissive of soft concerns like community impact, seemed transformed by his relationship with his granddaughter. Or perhaps, Robert reflected, this side of him had always existed, hidden behind the corporate persona. As the evening wound down, guests gradually departed. Lily approached, clearly tired but still glowing from the success of her talk. "Ready to go, Dad?" she asked through her device. "Whenever you are," he replied, then hesitated. "Unless you and Danny had plans?" Lily smiled at his awkward attempt to give her space. "Danny's helping his publisher with a launch event. I'll see him tomorrow." As they said their goodbyes and headed for the exit, Lily paused. "Can we go back to where it all started? Just for a minute?" Robert knew immediately what she meant. The Crystal Room was only a few blocks away. Of course, the restaurant was busy, even at this late hour. They didn't have a reservation, but the maitre d' recognized them immediately. The Foundation's work had received enough publicity that they were often recognized in public now. "Mr. Chen, Miss Chen, what an honor," he said, leading them to a table. "It's been some time since you've dined with us." "Just a quick visit tonight," Robert explained, "for old times' sake." As they settled at a table, the same one they had sat at 3 years ago, Robert noticed the small dance floor where Lily and Tasha had shared that first dance. A couple swayed there now, lost in their own world. "It looks smaller than I remember," Lily typed. "Everything does when you've grown," Robert replied. A server approached, not Tasha, of course, but a young man who treated Lily with the same direct respect that Tasha had shown that first night. The simple courtesy no longer seemed remarkable. To Robert, His expectations had changed along with so much else. "Do you ever wonder," Lily asked after they had ordered drinks, "what would have happened if we hadn't come here that night? If Tasha hadn't been our server?" Robert considered the question. "I think about it often, actually. How close we came to missing this path entirely." "I might never have danced," Lily typed, her expression thoughtful. "And I might never have seen beyond my own limited vision of success," Robert added. "Robert, I thought I was teaching you about the world, but you were the one teaching me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their drinks and watching the dancers. Robert remembered how tense he had been that night 3 years ago, checking his phone constantly, worried about the business meeting with Victor. Now his phone remained untouched in his pocket. Some things were more important than being constantly connected to work. "Dad," Lily typed suddenly, "I've been thinking about college." Robert nodded encouragingly. They had discussed various options, all with strong support services for students with disabilities. "I want to study business," she continued, "and dance therapy, a double major." Robert raised an eyebrow, surprised. "That's ambitious." "I want to take over the foundation someday," Lily explained. "Not just the programs, but all of it. The strategy, the growth, the financial side. I need to understand both worlds." Pride swelled in Robert's chest. His daughter, who had once been too shy to order for herself in restaurants, now planned to lead an organization that was changing thousands of lives. "You'll be better at it than I ever was," he told her sincerely. "Different," she corrected, echoing Victor's earlier words. "We make a good team." As they prepared to leave, Robert found himself looking back at that small dance floor one last time. Such an ordinary space. Yet it had been the stage for a moment that changed everything. Outside, the night air was cool against their faces. Stars peeked through the city's light pollution, distant but persistent. Lily looked up at them, then at her father. "Thank you," she typed. "For what?" "For letting me dance that night. For seeing me. Not just my chair. For changing." Robert knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "Lily, you don't need to thank me for that. I'm the one who's grateful. You showed me what really matters." She smiled, squeezing his hands with surprising strength. "We showed each other." As they made their way home through the city streets, Robert reflected on how far they had come, not just in the growth of the foundation or in Lily's remarkable development, but in his own journey. He had once measured success in dollars, in deals closed, in market share gained. Now he measured it differently, in barriers broken, in minds changed, in lives touched, in the confidence on his daughter's face as she spoke to a room full of strangers, in the communities forming around their centers where difference was celebrated rather than merely accommodated. It had begun with a simple moment, a father letting his disabled daughter dance with a black waitress. That single act of openness had rippled outward, touching lives neither of them had ever met. It had changed his life, yes, but more importantly, it had changed countless others. And it had started with a dance, proof that sometimes the most powerful movements begin with the smallest steps.